Alright, so we're going to work on your first quiz. So our goal here is to make this sketch. So I'm just going to start a new design and kind of walk you through this. So we start with a sketch. We pick a sketch plane looking down from the top view. Works the best for this. I'm just going to draw a simple rectangle. And then I'm going to add my dimensions that were listed on the quiz. And remember, if you can't find the dimension bar, it's in the drop-down menu too. So we're going to do 2.5 by 2.5. And then we're going to draw a line here and use this to cut off the corner with the trim tool. So we want to set our dimensions. This is going to be a 1/2 inch from the corner of your square. Okay, and notice that this distance should now be 2. And we can put a driven dimension there for now. And after we trim this, we'll have to redimension it so that it doesn't move on us later. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my trimming tool and I'm just going to click on those lines to get rid of them. And notice now all the lines around the square have become blue again. So that means that they're not constrained. So we want to make sure they're constrained. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete that driven dimension. And I will put in a listed dimension. And notice now when I do this, all the lines turn black, and that means that this square is now fixed. And it won't be able to move on us later when we draw our next thing. So we're going to draw these lines. This is going to be for the wall. Okay, and I drew these intentionally crooked to show you how to use the constraint tool. So we're just going to use the horizontal vertical constraint tool here. And anything that's close to horizontal or close to vertical is going to snap to horizontal vertical when you click on it after you select that constraint. Okay, and then I have to set a dimension here. Okay, so we're going to make this distance 0.25 inches. And same for the other side. Now what we're going to do is draw a construction line. So we want to have a hole in the middle of this, and we need a reference for where that hole is going to be. So I'm just going to draw a construction line here using that line type tool over in the sketch palette bar. Okay, and now I'm going to click on that and click on the edge, make sure that it's at 45 degrees. So that's using the dimension tool. Then I'm going to go in here, I'm going to get a point. So I want to put a point where all 3 of those lines meet each other, because I'm going to use that for my distance reference. Okay, so for this one, we actually want this to be 1.43. So that's the distance from where those 2 corners meet and where the center of that line sits. Okay, so now that I have this sketch drawn, I can extrude the base. Okay, and we're going to make a new body. So you can see that operation. I'm just going to select all 4 of these. Okay, and then I'm going to go back into my browser bar. I'm going to turn that sketch back on so that I have that reference point in the middle. And then I'm going to make a hole. And I'll click on that dot. Okay, now we have to change this hole a little bit to fit some standard hardware. So we're going to do a counter bore that's threaded. And we want to go to our size and select the 0.25, 1/4 inch. And then we're going to do that 1/4 C-bolt. Okay, and then I'm going to change this opening to 0.5, and I want it to be 0.1 inches deep. So that's the head of the bolt that we're going to use. And notice how from the bottom side it cuts out a place for that bolt to kind of be recessed into, because we're going to set this on the table. And then here you can see that it's threaded. Now the next step for this is we want to use the same sketch to build the plate that is going to hold our dice kind of in a display. So as I start drawing multiple things here, I want to make sure that I can keep them sorted out. So I'm going to rename body 1 to be my base plate. And as we draw more things in our sketch, we're going to have more challenges with this getting more and more confusing. So naming things in your browser is really good idea to keep track of things. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a sketch on top of this thing that we already extruded. And I'm going to use a tool called the project tool, okay, which is located in the create bar. And then I just want to click on all the lines from my first sketch that I want to reuse. So I'm going to click on those 2 lines that we just drew, and then the outside lines of my square that we cut off. And then we also need that center point that we drew in the last sketch. And notice now I have 2 sketches. Okay, so sketch 1 is going to be the base plate sketch. So again, a good idea to keep track of your sketches and your bodies with their own names. Okay, and then I'm going to rename this new thing that I drew as my cover. And now notice I have 2 sketches here that are on slightly different planes. One was for the bottom base that I already extruded, and this top drawing is for my actual cover. Okay, and so what I want to do here is extrude all of this stuff again to 0.25, but I'm just going to select the middle. Okay, and I want to create a new body because I don't want this to attach to the thing that I've already extruded. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in, turn the sketch back on, and then I'm going to extrude these edges up a little bit higher so that there's a lip that the dice can sit in. Okay, and I'm going to make this 0.6 inches tall. Okay, and what you want to make sure is that this joined to that. So in your operation, you want to make sure you have join selected. Okay, now what I'm going to do is change the appearance so that we can tell these 2 pieces apart. There's lots of preloaded appearances in Fusion, okay, but we're just going to use the paint one and make it a different color for now. So I'm just going to click on paint, and we'll use blue. So we hit the little download button there. And then you can just grab and drag that onto the body that's already there. So I'm just going to grab it, drag it, and now it's blue. And that allows us to see the 2 parts kind of independently of each other. So if I turn the base plate body back on, now you can see that we built one on top of the other. Okay, and now I'm going to rename this. Right, so this is my cover. Okay, and now what I notice here is the hole that was cut is not threaded. And what we want to do is attach the base plate to the cover using that bolt. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back into the extrusion that I've already done. Okay, so if you right click on the body up there, it's a little bit harder to find. So the best way to do this is to click in your timeline on the extrusion you did and hit Edit Feature. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to select that circle for that hole to extrude so that I don't have anything there. Okay, and then I'll go back, just like we did in the first drawing, and find that dot point that we put in there and use it to center the hole that I want to draw. Okay, and we just want to change the settings to what we already had, right? And right now it's not showing up because it's too big for the thickness of our material, so we have to change these settings. Okay, so make sure you select the dot, the center dot. Okay, and you may get an error at this point, which is okay. Once you change the dimensions of the bolt hole, it will not give you that arrow anymore. Okay, so we're going to do 0.5 again and 0.1 thickness. Okay, but what we don't actually need here is the bolt head going in. So we're only worried about that on the bottom. So double check that you have the 0.25 size, the 1/4-20 designation. Okay, and then we're actually going to select the hole type. We're going to change it back to a simple hole. Okay, so no bolt head or anything needs to be put in this piece. Okay, so the bolt head will sit in that base, but not in the cover. Okay, so now I have a hole that's threaded, so we'll be able to thread all these parts together. Okay, so now we're going to do just a couple things that make it look a little bit nicer. So chamfering and fillets are ways to kind of round or flatten corners so that they're not so sharp. So we're going to round this inside corner with a fillet. Notice you can pull on the little arrow to kind of adjust it, but we're going to type a value in here of 0.1. Okay, and that just gives us that little nice rounded corner there. Okay, and then on the outside edge, we're going to also round that corner. So same thing, we're going to do a fillet. We'll do that at 0.1 as well. And then if I turn my base plate on, notice now that this sits on the base plate. It doesn't quite match up. So I'm also going to add that fillet to the base plate. Okay, so I'll shut the base plate off for now. And then the last thing we're going to do here, kind of to make this look a little bit nicer on the front edge, we're going to use the fillet tool or the chamfer tool, either one. I kind of like the chamfer on the front edge, so we'll use the chamfer. And then I'm just going to click on those 3 lines on the front, and then notice I can grab that arrow, I can kind of slide it in and out to give it an effect. Okay, we could go really steep like that. Okay, but again, we'll default here to 0.1. That's a nice size for a fillet or a chamfer. Okay, so look for part 2 where we're going to draw the dice and figure out how to mount that to our base plate and cover.